This was the peak period of the Persian Empire, a vast kingdom stretching from India to Ethiopia, encompassing 127 provinces. Ruling this empire was King Ahasuerus, a powerful king with unparalleled luxury and authority. His power was absolute, and his laws were unchangeable. To display the wealth, glory, and majesty of the empire, King Ahasuerus held a grand feast in the capital city of Susa, lasting for 180 days. The commanders of the Persian and Median armies, the nobles, and the provincial governors were all invited to witness the splendor of the empire through precious Persian carpets and sparkling jewelry. The wine goblets were all made of gold, each of a different design. The wine was served abundantly, reflecting the king's generosity. The king ordered his courtiers to allow everyone to drink as much as they wished, without restriction. King Ahasuerus raised his goblet, his voice majestic.
O guests, let us raise our glasses to toast the prosperity of the Persian Empire. No kingdom can match our strength and wealth.
The guests responded in unison.
Long live the king. Long live the Persian Empire.
Meanwhile, Queen Vashti, the most beautiful woman in the empire, also hosted a feast for the noble women in the palace. But her fate was about to change due to a fateful decision. On the seventh day, when the wine had made King Ahasuerus merry, in his drunken state, he commanded,
"Bring Queen Vashti here, so that everyone can admire her."
A courtier rushed into the hall, knelt before King Ahasuerus, his face panicked.
Your Majesty, Queen Vashti refuses to come at your command. She will not appear before you and the guests.
King Ahasuerus was furious.
What? She dares to defy my command in front of everyone?
King Ahasuerus stood up, pacing back and forth in his rage. The advisors whispered among themselves, worried about the situation. Queen Vashti's refusal was not only an act of disobedience, but also a public humiliation for the king. In an empire where the law was inviolable, this act could not be overlooked. Advisor Memucan spoke up.
Vashti, the queen, hath not done wrong to the king only. For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes. If it please the king, let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she.
King Ahasuerus nodded, his voice cold.
You are right. Vashti is no longer queen. I will issue a decree to find someone to replace her.
So, Queen Vashti was dethroned, with an edict sent to all the king's provinces, that every man should bear rule in his own house. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti. The courtiers suggested finding young, beautiful maidens for the king, with officials in each province tasked with selecting the most beautiful young women to bring to the capital, Susa. Then, the maiden who pleased the king the most would become queen in place of Vashti. The king was very pleased with this and ordered it to be done immediately. A search for a new queen began across the Persian Empire, from the most distant lands, to find a worthy replacement. The decree was issued, opening a new chapter in the reign of King Ahasuerus. Among the young women selected in Susa was a beautiful girl named Hadassah. She was not born into luxury or nobility. She was an orphan, having lost her parents at a very young age. The one who raised her was Mordecai, her uncle, a Jew faithful to his beliefs. In this humble home, Hadassah grew up with love and lessons in humility and faith in God. Before she was taken to the palace, Mordecai asked her,
Hadassah, is something troubling you?
She hesitated.
Uncle, I am to be taken to the palace to be considered for the new queen. I fear I will make a mistake.
Mordecai replied seriously.
If it is God's will, you cannot escape it. But listen to me. When you enter the palace, You must not reveal your Jewish identity. Do not tell anyone about your origins. From now on, you will be known as Esther. The world out there is not safe for our people.
Esther nodded slowly, and Mordecai placed his hand on her shoulder. His eyes filled with trust mixed with concern. Mordecai understood the dangers lurking for the Jews in the Persian Empire. His instructions were not just protection, but also a great challenge for Esther, to live in the luxurious palace while hiding her true self. On the day Esther entered the palace, she carried with her the timidity of a girl raised in simplicity. To her, the palace was not just a strange place, but also a maze full of challenges. At the main gate of the Susa Palace, dozens of young women from all over were gathered. Laughter and chatter filled the air, but Esther stood quietly in the crowd, her hands clutching the hem of her dress, her eyes looking around in confusion. A court official stepped forward and read the list of those selected. When Esther's name was called, she started, stepping forward with trembling legs. The other girls whispered, looking at her curiously. Esther was led into a large room where the palace maids began to prepare her. They dressed her in a magnificent gown, applied makeup, and styled her hair. Esther looked into the mirror, her eyes wide with astonishment, as if she did not recognize herself. She learned how to walk, eat, and apply makeup in the royal manner. At first, she was clumsy, dropping spoons and missing steps. But over time, she became more graceful. She and the other maidens had to undergo beauty treatments for 12 months. 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with perfumes and cosmetics. Everyone in the palace who met Esther loved her. She received the best treatment and the most beautiful clothes. The palace maids cheerfully said,
"You look like a princess. The king will surely notice you."
Esther replied softly.
I don't know if I truly belong here.
Esther's timidity came not only from the opulence of the palace, but also from the burden of keeping her identity secret. Every glance, every word could be a danger, but deep down, she believed that God had placed her here for a reason. In moments of solitude, Esther turned to God for strength. Despite her shyness and unease, she knew that this journey was not by chance. As time passed, Esther stood before the mirror in a magnificent royal gown, her hair adorned with shimmering pearls. She looked at herself, no longer as timid as before, but confident and renewed. Her eyes still reflected humility and deep faith. After a year of preparation, Esther was ready to meet King Ahasuerus. Though still anxious, she believed that God was always with her, guiding her path. When it was Esther's turn to meet the king, she requested nothing except what Haggai, the eunuch in charge of the harem, had advised. When the king saw Esther, he loved her more than all the other women. He placed the royal crown on her head. Neither Esther nor the king knew that God had placed her on the throne to fulfill a great mission. The Jewish orphan was now the queen, and the entire country celebrated with feasts in her honor. As Esther began to adjust to royal life, Mordecai was still working at the palace. On a fateful night, he happened to overhear 2 voices whispering in the darkness, in a secluded corner near the palace gate in Susa, revealing a plot to harm the king. Bigthan whispered,
"Tomorrow night, when the king is off guard, we will strike."
Teresh.
Yes, once Ahasuerus is dead, we will seize power.
Mordecai was horrified, clutching his cloak tightly, realizing that this plot was a great threat to the king. Without hesitation, he turned and ran quickly towards the court to send a message to Esther. He knew that only Esther, in her position as queen, could convey this message to King Ahasuerus in time. After receiving the information from Mordecai, Esther had someone relay this information to the king. King Ahasuerus ordered his guards to investigate the information. When the guards returned, they confirmed the plot was true. King Ahasuerus was furious and decided to execute them immediately for treason. Thanks to Mordecai's timely message, King Ahasuerus escaped harm. The traitors were captured and hanged. Mordecai's good deed was recorded in the royal chronicles, but few paid attention, and the news quickly faded into oblivion. People may forget, but God does not. Mordecai's small act, though buried in the flow of time, would soon be used by God to change history in a way no one could foresee. Meanwhile, a man was quietly rising to power in the court. He became the greatest threat to God's people. His name was Haman, an Agagite, the hereditary enemy of the Jewish people, carrying within him unparalleled arrogance and malice. With power in his hands, Haman demanded that everyone bow before him as a symbol of respect and submission. Everyone complied, except for one man, Mordecai. When Haman approached, the surrounding crowd hurriedly bowed in fear. But Mordecai stood tall, his gaze steady, not moving an inch. Mordecai's refusal did not escape Haman's notice, and the officials, surprised and worried, came to question him.
Why transgressest thou the king's commandment?
Mordecai replied,
I am a Jew. I do not bow before any man.
Mordecai's declaration ignited Haman's fury. However, killing Mordecai alone was not enough to satisfy his pride and hatred. Haman decided to exterminate the entire Jewish people, Mordecai's nation. But he did not anticipate that within the palace, someone would soon rise to confront this plot. Haman approached the king, armed with venomous words and a meticulously crafted deadly scheme. His heart was filled with hatred and ambition, determined to destroy the Jewish people, whom he saw as a threat to his power. Bowing before the king, his eyes sharp and cold, he prepared to speak, his voice smooth but laced with malice.
There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore, it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business, to bring it into the king's treasuries.
Haman cleverly concealed the identity of the Jewish people, referring to them only as certain people. He wanted the king to believe they were a hidden danger, not worth keeping in his vast empire. King Ahasuerus asked no further questions, nor did he order an investigation. He simply handed over the power to decide the fate of thousands to Haman. The royal ring was placed upon the scroll, and the death sentence for the Jewish people was officially sealed. Haman bowed in gratitude, a triumphant smile curling his lips. He left the throne room and delivered the decree to the scribes. A group of messengers was swiftly summoned. They mounted their horses, preparing to carry the dreadful news throughout the empire. A decree spread like a poisonous wind through every corner of the Persian Empire. On the exact day of the 13th of the month of Adar, all Jews, from old to young, men and women, would be destroyed, without exception. The fate of an entire people had been decided, hanging precariously on the edge of destruction. The people in the provinces began to stir in fear as the decree was proclaimed. The wind blew strongly, carrying a sense of unease that spread through the air. Haman had achieved what he desired, but in the darkness of this plot, a ray of hope still quietly flickered, awaiting the moment to shine brightly. The atmosphere in Susa grew heavy with the sound of weeping as the Jewish people sank into despair. When Mordecai heard the news of the king's decree, his heart shattered. He tore his clothes, wrapped himself in sackcloth and ashes, signs of utmost anguish. Stumbling into the streets, he clutched his chest, his mouth emitting mournful cries that seemed to shake the very heavens. From every city to every province, They knew that death was approaching, with no other hope in sight. But within the palace of Susa, Esther remained unaware of the disaster about to strike. She was isolated behind the luxurious and peaceful walls, far from the suffering of her people. Suddenly, Esther's maid rushed in, her face filled with alarm. Bowing before Esther, she said,
"Your Majesty, Queen Esther, dire news awaits your attention. Your beloved uncle Mordecai stands at the palace gate, cloaked in the dark garb of mourning, his tears falling without end. The people outside are in turmoil."
Surprised and worried, Esther ordered a servant named Hatak to investigate. At the palace gate, Mordecai sat huddled on the ground, his head bowed low, his hands clutching the sackcloth wrapped around him. He said,
Doomed by the king's ruthless edict, our people face utter destruction. Esther, you alone stand as their final savior. Step boldly before the king and plead for their lives, before the shadow of annihilation swallows us all.
Mordecai placed all his hope in Esther, the only one who could approach the king. But whether Esther would have the courage to face the danger and stand up for her people remained an unanswered question. Esther's eyes revealed clear unease, her heart pounding heavily. Mordecai's request plunged her into extreme fear. She knew well the harsh laws of the court. Anyone who stepped into the king's palace without being summoned would face death. Esther paced back and forth in her room, her hands gripping the hem of her gold-embroidered robe tightly. Turning to her maid, Hatak, her trembled but tried to remain calm.
All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days.
Mordecai had sent a final message, not just a plea, but a stern warning. His words were like a cold wind blowing through Esther's soul, making her heart tremble.
Think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed, and who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this?
Mordecai's words echoed in her mind, sharp as a dagger piercing her heart. Esther was silent, but within her raged a storm of emotions. She began to realize the truth. She had been brought to the palace, favored by the king, and crowned queen, not by mere chance. A greater purpose awaited her, a mission she could not refuse. Esther realized she could not escape her responsibility. With a heavy but courageous heart, she made a decision that would change everything. She called her maidservants close, her voice steady yet trembling slightly with the awareness of the burden ahead.
Go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish.
The decision was made, and Esther stood at the threshold of destiny. Now, she prepared to face her fate, a path that could lead to the light of salvation or the darkness of death. 3 long days passed in steadfastness, 3 days without food, 3 days immersed in prayer, 3 days for Esther to steel her heart, silently bidding farewell to the life she once knew. For at this moment, she was walking the thin line between life and death, with a burning courage that nothing could extinguish. Across the kingdom, the Jews knelt in absolute unity, their hands clasped tightly, their prayers rising in harmony to the Almighty. In the magnificent palace, the maidservants also knelt together, eyes closed, fasting and praying with her. After 3 days, Esther rose, donning her most regal queenly attire, her hair meticulously arranged, her jewelry gleaming. She took a deep breath and stepped out of her chamber, her hands trembling slightly, but her face serene. With a heart ready for any outcome, she proceeded to the throne room of King Ahasuerus. The vast throne room was ablaze with golden light, but the air was as cold as ice. King Ahasuerus sat on his high throne, his presence unmatched in authority, surrounded by guards standing motionless like statues, their hands gripping gleaming spears, their eyes as sharp as blades. No one could enter without being summoned. No one could approach the king without permission. The punishment for such audacity was one: immediate death. Yet Esther advanced, defying all. The doors of the great hall slowly opened, and Esther appeared, resplendent in her attire but walking slowly, as if each step was a silent declaration, drawing her closer to the scythe of death. The guards watched in horror, gripping their weapons tightly, ready to act. They knew what would happen to those who defied the king's law. But her gaze did not waver. It was fixed straight ahead on the throne, where her fate and that of her people would be decided. King Ahasuerus looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes as he saw Esther. He observed her silently, his face betraying no emotion. Esther stopped a few steps from the throne, standing tall, awaiting judgment. The tension was suffocating, with only the sound of her steady breathing breaking the deadly silence. The king saw her radiant beauty, standing out in the vast space. Yet, on her face, the marks of her long days of fasting were evident. Her deep eyes shone with resolve, her pale skin reflecting the strength of her sacrifice. Esther remained steadfast, dignified, and unyielding, knowing that this moment would determine the fate of her entire people. Everything now rested in the king's hands. The raised golden scepter meant life, while a cold gaze meant death. An indescribable emotion surged within the king, a mixture of admiration and something undefinable. Then, slowly, he raised the golden scepter, pointing it directly at Esther. The entire room breathed a sigh of relief, and faint whispers spread among the courtiers. Esther had passed the first test, but she knew the road ahead was still fraught with difficulty. The king's eyes were now filled with curiosity and concern.
What is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed.
Esther took a deep breath to steady herself, then spoke with humility, but clarity.
If I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition, and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow, as the king hath said.
The invitation seemed simple, but behind it lay a meticulously calculated move. Esther did not reveal her true intentions. Instead, she skillfully drew the king and Haman into her plan, preparing for the decisive moment that would change everything. King Ahasuerus smiled with satisfaction, nodding without hesitation. He signaled his attendants to note the invitation and inform Haman. Esther rose, bowed once more in gratitude, and left the throne room. Her heart pounded with a mix of hope and anxiety for what lay ahead. When Haman received the invitation to a private feast with the king and queen, his pride soared to its peak. He was overjoyed, feeling like the most esteemed figure in the court. But that joy didn't last long. As he stepped out of the palace gate, the smile on his lips suddenly vanished. There, Mordecai stood tall, his gaze resolute. Once again, Mordecai did not bow before Haman. That act of defiance was like a fire burning away his joy. turning it into an uncontrollable rage. He clenched his fists but then turned on his heel, striding quickly back to his residence, carrying with him a blazing fury. Haman returned to his estate and slammed his hand down on the wooden table, his face flushed with anger.
Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself. And tomorrow am I invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate.
Zeresh, Haman's wife, sat in an armchair, observing her husband with a cold gaze. She gave a sinister smile, slowly rose, and approached Haman, placing her hand on his shoulder as if to soothe him.
Let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet.
Haman looked up, his eyes gleaming with delight. He nodded, his face gradually relaxing into a wicked smile. He stood up, walked to the door, and ordered his servants with a triumphant tone.
Excellent idea. Tonight, I will have the gallows built. Tomorrow, Mordecai will die, and I will enjoy the feast in complete joy.
That night, a group of workers began their task. The sound of hammers echoing as they erected massive gallows, 25 meters high. As ordered by Haman, the wind blew through, carrying a sense of coldness and unease. Haman, blinded by hatred and arrogance, was unaware that while he was plotting revenge, God had already scripted his downfall. That gallows was not just a tool of revenge, but also a sign of the cruel fate awaiting the wicked. That night, King Ahasuerus could not sleep at all. He tossed and turned on his royal bed, his mind caught in unclear thoughts. The flickering light from the candles illuminated the king's troubled face in the quiet late night. To dispel his restlessness, he decided to summon his attendants and request the record books be brought. A servant opened the scroll and began to read aloud the lines recorded long ago. The king listened, his gaze sharpening as the story of Mordecai was mentioned. A forgotten story from that day in Shushan, when Mordecai, an ordinary Jew, saved the king's life by exposing the plot of the treacherous officers. This event flashed like a bright light in his mind. The king sprang up from his bed, his eyes shining. Turning to the silent secretaries, the king's voice rang out with emotion.
What an honor for Mordecai! I must reward him accordingly.
The king knew he needed a grand plan to honor this hero, and the first person he thought to consult was Haman, his most trusted advisor. The next morning, the palace corridors were bright with sunlight. Haman walked with an arrogant demeanor, his mind preoccupied with his intent to destroy Mordecai, but he was unaware that fate was preparing a blow that would humiliate him. King Ahasuerus sat on his throne and summoned Haman to enter. Haman bowed, a smug smile on his lips. The king looked at him with an unreadable gaze and asked,
What shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor?
Haman's heart beat fast, joy and pride surging within him. He thought to himself that the king was referring to him, the most loyal courtier. He raised his head high, his voice confident and resonant.
For the man whom the king delighteth to honor, let the royal apparel be brought which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man withal whom the king delighteth to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honor.
Haman was immersed in his delusion of his own glory, completely unaware that his suggestion was digging a deep pit for himself. The The king smiled, but that smile concealed an entirely different intention. He leaned forward, his voice warm yet full of authority, resonating in the great hall.
Make haste, and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew, that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken.
Haman was stunned, his entire body cold, his face shifting from pride to astonishment, then quickly sinking into deep disappointment. His world seemed to collapse in an instant. He wanted to resist, but before the king's sharp gaze, he had no choice but to bow his head and step back in silence. The next morning, with humiliation he could not hide, he was forced to carry out the king's command. He dressed Mordecai in the royal robe, had Mordecai ride the king's horse, and Haman himself had to lead the horse through the crowded streets of Susa. The streets were bustling. The people gathered on both sides, curiously watching the rare spectacle. Mordecai, in the magnificent royal robe, sat on the king's white horse, his demeanor calm yet majestic. In contrast, Haman, with a face twisted in anger and humiliation, held the reins and led the horse forward. Haman reluctantly shouted, his voice trembling, trying to retain some remaining pride.
Thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor.
The crowd cheered and clapped, but for Haman, each cheer was like a dagger stabbing his self-esteem. He glanced at Mordecai, his eyes burning with hatred. The man he once wanted to hang was now being honored by him before the entire city. Haman staggered, his legs nearly buckling under the weight of the humiliation. His meticulously planned scheme to destroy Mordecai was now nothing but ashes. He didn't have a second to collapse, because that night, a party was prepared, waiting for him to enter. Haman stepped into the banquet hall, where everything was adorned with opulence, the brilliant light from chandeliers shimmering off the walls. The long table overflowed with exquisite Persian delicacies, from fragrant roasted meats to glistening fresh fruits. Yet, amid the lively ambiance, Haman felt a gnawing unease in his chest. His eyes darted around, scrutinizing every corner, as though he sensed a hidden threat lurking nearby. As he took his seat, he forced a strained smile, but his trembling hands on the wine glass revealed the tempest raging within him. Esther, resplendent in her regal queenly attire, sat across from him, her expression calm yet her eyes flickering with tension. King Ahasuerus, presiding at the head of the table, watched them both with curious eyes. After a moment of silence, the king spoke to Esther, his voice warm but commanding, as if to dispel the oppressive air.
What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom.
Esther drew a deep breath, her hands on the table clenching slightly. She knew with absolute clarity that this was the moment upon which the fate of the entire Jewish people hinged. She rose slowly, her gaze unwavering as she faced the king.
If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage.
King Ahasuerus' expression shifted instantly, from astonishment to a blaze of fury. His eyes flared like fire, his hand gripping so tightly that veins bulged. He leapt to his feet, his voice roaring like thunder.
Who is he, and where is he, that durst presume in his heart to do so?
Without a moment's hesitation, Esther turned to face Haman, her stare icy and fearless. She pointed directly at him, her voice resounding through the hushed room.
The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman.
Haman's face drained of color, his eyes wide with dread. He stood, but his legs buckled, forcing him to clutch the table to steady himself. Terror surged through him as he realized his scheme had been laid bare. He grasped his head, struggling to suppress a cry. The courtiers, who moments before had been chatting gaily, now sat frozen in silence, their eyes locked on Haman, stunned and fearful at the sudden upheaval. In a surge of rage, King Ahasuerus rose and stormed out of the banquet hall. He strode swiftly into the palace garden, striving to quell the fury blazing within him. Meanwhile, Haman remained, trembling, fully aware that his doom was sealed. The atmosphere in the banquet hall grew suffocatingly tense. At this moment, during the feast, Haman fell to his knees before Esther. The arrogance that once burned brightly had now faded, replaced by naked terror, trembling. He clutched tightly at the hem of the queen's robe, his voice shattered in despair.
Please, Queen, save me. I beg you, spare my life.
But Esther stood there, motionless as a statue, her eyes cold and sharp, unmoved by his pitiful plea. She looked down at Haman, the one who had cast darkness over her people, now just a weak figure, struggling in the mire of his own sins. At that very moment, King Ahasuerus stepped in from the garden outside, his eyes blazing with anger as he saw Haman clinging to Esther. He advanced, his voice booming with authority and fury.
Will he force the queen also before me in the house?
Immediately, 2 guards approached and pulled Haman away from Esther. One quickly covered Haman's face with a black cloth. He struggled in vain, his cries muffled under the fabric. Esther turned her face away, not looking at the scene, for Haman's fate was sealed at that moment. In Persia, when a man's face is covered, it is an irreversible end. No plea holds meaning. No escape is possible. Harbona, a eunuch attendant, stepped forward to the king, bowing respectfully, pointing toward the distance where Haman's gallows stood tall in the courtyard. He reported to the king,
"Behold also, the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman."
King Ahasuerus scowled and raised his hand, his voice sharp as a blade.
Hang him thereon.
The guards dragged Haman out of the banquet hall. He screamed in despair, but his cries were quickly drowned out by the footsteps of the guards. Thus ended the fate of the man who dared to challenge God's people. Haman was hanged on the very gallows he had prepared for another. Justice was served, and peace once again returned to the palace of Susa. On that same day, King Ahasuerus gave Queen Esther all of Haman's estate. But the battle was not over yet, for even though Haman was dead, the king's decree, once issued, could not be revoked. In a few months, the enemies of the Jews would slaughter them, and the genocide would still take place. Esther, risking her life once again, entered the throne room. She knelt at the feet of King Ahasuerus, with tears in her eyes, weeping in anguish and despair, pleading for her people.
If it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the things seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews which are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred?
King Ahasuerus frowned, his eyes showing his dilemma. He rose from his throne, clutching his scepter tightly. Although he could not revoke the old decree, he sought to respond to Esther's plea with a new solution.
I cannot revoke the decree that has been issued, but hear my words. I permit the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together, and to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey.
Esther rejoiced, knowing that this was her people's last chance to defend themselves. King Ahasuerus ordered the scribes to write the new decree immediately. The letters were written in the script of each people and in the language of each province, and were carried by the king's couriers riding on horses, mules, and camels throughout all the provinces from India to Ethiopia. The new decree brought a ray of hope, granting the Jews the right to defend themselves before the fateful day. The cities across the Persian Empire, from large metropolises to small villages, were filled with an atmosphere of readiness for battle. The Jewish people gathered, prepared to defend themselves against their enemies. Thanks to the king's new decree, the Jews rose up with absolute determination. When the fateful day arrived, the enemies of the Jews attacked them. But the Jews did not fear. They assembled in the cities throughout King Ahasuerus' provinces, striking down those who sought to harm them. No one could withstand them, for all feared the Jews. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the Jews in the provinces gathered to defend their lives and destroy their foes, killing 75,000 enemies. They hanged Haman's 10 sons on the gallows, but refrained from seizing their property or exacting excessive revenge. On the 14th day, they rested and celebrated their victory. Meanwhile, the Jews in Susa assembled to fight their enemies for 2 days, the 13th and 14th, and only on the 15th did they rest and rejoice in their triumph. God's people had overcome Haman's wicked curse. They were filled with boundless joy, for no threat remained against them. The joy did not end there. The king also elevated Mordecai to a high position, appointing him as the prime minister under King Ahasuerus. Mordecai became a hero of the Jewish people, beloved by all, for he always protected and defended their rights. Together with Esther, they issued a decree that this day would be commemorated forever. This festival is called Purim, which in Persian means casting lots. On this day, they celebrate with joy, exchanging gifts and giving to the poor. For these are the days when the Jewish people emerged from the shadow of death, transforming sorrow into gladness and pain into overflowing happiness. The old grief vanished like smoke, giving way to the radiant light of hope, and the tears once shed turned into beaming smiles. Above all, Purim serves as a profound reminder of how God, though unnamed, silently wove the story of salvation. His hand, though unseen, guided justice through countless trials, rescuing his people from the enemy's blade. Through Mordecai and Esther, he revealed his mercy and wondrous power, imparting an eternal lesson. Justice, though sometimes obscured, will ultimately shine like the sun. We sincerely thank the audience for staying with us until the final moments of the film about Esther. We made this video with all our love and desire to bring you meaningful and useful Bible stories. We hope this story has inspired you and strengthened your faith. Your support is a great motivation for us. If the film has touched your heart, leaving you moved by the love and wonder of God, please share, like, and subscribe to our channel to ensure you don't miss our upcoming great stories. Feel free to leave a comment and share your thoughts about Esther's story. We are happy to listen and engage in discussion with you. This is not the end of our exploration of the Bible. We are preparing to launch new exciting films. An emotional journey is waiting for you to discover. We send you our best wishes. May your day be filled with joy, peace, and a deep connection with the divine. God bless you.